LinkedIn ads are expensive. The platform's targeting isn't perfect. And yet, for B2B marketers, it might be the most precise lever you can pull if you know what you're doing. Today's guest is AJ Wilcox, founder of B2 Linked, a performance agency that's quietly managed over $200 million in LinkedIn ad spend. He's been in the trenches with 5 of the platform's top 10 global ad accounts, and he's one of the few voices who actually talks about what not to do with your budget. We get into the specifics, which default settings to always change, how to structure campaigns for remarketing from day one, and why AJ completely rejects LinkedIn's audience expansion and bidding recommendations. But the real story here is about control. How much of your ad performance can you really optimize when the platform's data is limited, its algorithms are opaque, and the costs are rising? We also unpack a few of AJ's original metrics, including cost per retargetable user, and his framework for scaling accounts from 5 figures to 7 without burning out the creative or the audience. For AJ, the challenge isn't just navigating LinkedIn's quirks, it's teaching his team to operate at 80% of his standard, while still delivering a 100-month performance for clients who expect perfection. Let's get into it. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Page 2 podcast. I'm your host, John Clark, and as always, joined by my partner in crime at Moving Traffic Media, Joe DeVita.
Hey.
Today, we're really excited to welcome probably the most known LinkedIn expert to the show, AJ Wilcox. Welcome.
Thanks so much, guys.
In preparing for this episode, it was really interesting to sort of see your history and sort of how you got to where you are today. I think a lot of us who have been in this industry for a long time sort of got into it by accident. I remember I was at a startup and they basically came in and said, hey, we have this Google Ads account that we've never looked at. And, can you take a look? And that was sort of the trajectory for me. For you, it was sort of similar on the LinkedIn side. Can you take us back to that moment and, I don't know, maybe give us a peek inside your head when they came in and said, hey, can you try out this LinkedIn campaign?
Yeah, totally. So I started out my career as an SEO guy and I loved SEO, but what I didn't love was how the changes that I would make, I wouldn't be able to actually see the result for 4 to 6 months. And then I figured out about Google Ads or AdWords at the time. And I went, ooh, this is cool. It's the same keywords, but I get to see my results immediately because I'm paying for them. And so I got recruited into a B2B SaaS company. And this was they've since gone public, but it was just pre-IPO. I was their first digital marketing guy. And as I went in saying, hey, I can do SEO, I can do PPC. And my CMO, my new boss said, by the way, we just started a pilot using LinkedIn ads 2 weeks ago. See what you can do. And I didn't want to look stupid to my new boss. So I saluted and said, yes, ma'am, and jumped in. And within about 2 weeks, what I was doing is I was taking my same Google Ads strategies and applying them to LinkedIn. It was like these tight ad groups. So it was tight audiences, micro segmented. That was kind of the way I did things. And within about 2 weeks, my sales reps came up and said, hey, AJ, we don't know what you're doing over here, but we're in love with your leads and we're fighting over them. Keep it up. So I went and chased those leads down in the CRM and went, every single one of these is coming from LinkedIn. There's got to be something more here. So over the next 2.5 years, I grew that to become LinkedIn's largest spending account at the time. And over the course of that, I loved LinkedIn ads so much that I ended up giving SEO to an agency and I gave Google Ads to another agency. All of my attention was on LinkedIn. It was the highest producing channel for the company. And, I had really good relationships with LinkedIn's product team and my reps. And, that was where I just went, okay, I want my career to go all in on LinkedIn ads.
Yeah, I guess fast forward to today, you've managed 5, maybe even more than that at this point, of the top 10 spending accounts on LinkedIn, which is just an incredible percentage. And maybe without sort of getting into individual names, right, that you've worked with, like what is the difference between managing an account of that scale compared to, I don't know, maybe a smaller B2B company that's just sort of starting out? Like I don't know, is it all the same or is it really different when you get into that sort of scale?
Well, it's funny. I've had my employees say, like when they're on a 7-figure a month account and then on a 6 or a 5-figure a month account, they go, well, it's all the same stuff. It's just all of my numbers, you add a 0 or you add 2 zeros to. And so that's one aspect to it. Like the principles are still the same when you're at really high scale. What does change, though, is how fast you can run A/B tests. When you're spending 7 figures a month on ads, obviously any edge that you can get, any optimization you can make is totally worth it because it saves tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars to your performance. So when you are running these tests, you can have statistical significance on your tests after 2 or 3 days versus a smaller size account. You might wait a week or a month to try to figure out what's working and what's not.
Well, let's maybe start with the basics. I definitely want to come back to testing because I think there's, would love to dig into your methodology there. But from a basic sort of account setup perspective, when you're setting up a brand new campaign, what are the most important sort of defaults to evaluate? Extended audiences and things like that we know aren't great, but are there other, defaults that are worth paying attention to when you're initially setting up that account?
Yeah, and you ask the right questions. It's which defaults do we avoid? Because all of the defaults that LinkedIn recommends are actually not great for you. So the first one that you come across is the geography when you target. LinkedIn defaults it to recent or permanent location. We like permanent because that's someone, when they create their profile, they say, I live in this city or in this state or whatever. We care about that. But recent, what does recent mean? LinkedIn doesn't even share this in their help documentation, but recent means they'd logged in that location in the last 6 months. So you could travel a lot of the world in 6 months and be in someone's audience. So first default is switch that to permanent location and you're good there. The next one is exactly what you mentioned, John. It was right below the targeting, there's an option for enable audience expansion, and you do not want that. First of all, LinkedIn is charging you a premium to advertise just so you can be specific about who your audience is. If you're not having a problem spending your budget on the exact audience you choose, why would you ever open it up to interpretation and let LinkedIn choose additional people to stick in that audience? So always uncheck that. I tell people, if you leave that checked, a baby seal gets clubbed. So you got to make sure you uncheck that. Third is down below that in the placement section. On a lot of the ad formats on LinkedIn, they will default you onto the LinkedIn audience network. And in theory, it sounds great. This is where you're able to target people using LinkedIn's targeting, but hitting them all around the web when they're on apps, on their phone, tablet, when they're around the web. Sounds great. But in our measurement, what we've figured out is over half of that traffic comes from fraudulent activity, from bots and from spam. And there are great uses for the LinkedIn Audience Network when you're using block lists and allow lists, right? But right up front, I always exclude it and I will test into the Audience Network a little bit later. And then finally, the fourth default you need to change is down in the bidding section. They start you on what's called maximum delivery bidding. And this is a really high CPM bidding way of paying. In fact, it's the most expensive way to pay for your traffic 95% of the time on the platform. So always switch that to manual bidding, and you're able to bid significantly lower than what LinkedIn recommends when you switch to manual.
Can I just one follow up on there? The audience expansion, you have seen some success with it?
No.
You never have. Okay. I thought you said
no.
The right exclusion lists, you have seen some success.
Yeah. So Audience Network, we have what I do is I have a really strict allow list where I'm only allowing you to show my ads to Wall Street, on Wall Street Journal, Business Insider, USA Today, the big publications that you can trust. And when I do that, I can get the Audience Network to give me better traffic that doesn't turn out to be an absolute waste. But yeah, the audience network, okay with block lists and exclusions. Audience expansion, never.
Okay, thanks.
I wanted to dig into the bidding models. Switching off from max delivery makes total sense at the start, but I would imagine at some point there is value to allowing the model to sort of learn and maybe bid on its own, if you will. How do you, maybe ask it a little bit differently. At what point do you think about sort of testing into moving off of manual bidding? Or is it something where you just really like that control and prefer to keep it that way, in perpetuity?
Control's cool, and I definitely have control issues in my life, but what I really care about is performance. I care about costs. And so if my ads are performing at a click-through rate that's about 3 times LinkedIn's average or higher, then I know that bidding by CPM actually gets me a lower effective cost per click. So that's what I watch for. Any sort of ad that's performing 3x the average, then I go, ooh, I'm going to switch you to maximum delivery, and you're probably going to save me money. Up until that point, though, yes, using max delivery allows LinkedIn to optimize towards the audiences that it thinks. So there is some AI, there's some machine learning happening there that might be helpful. But if you're paying 2 to 3 times more per click while it's learning, or even while it's serving, your effective cost per lead or cost per conversion is still going to be worse. So most of the time, I don't let LinkedIn do the optimization for me. I'd rather do it myself until they get better or until they get cheaper.
Yeah, let's talk about the learning period. With even small campaigns for that matter, like making changes around budget, bids, audiences, all those types of things can kick everything back into that learning mode. Do you have any tips on how to sort of limit that learning mode period and or not triggering it at all when you are trying to make those types of changes?
Yes, those who have experience with Meta, they come and they advertise on LinkedIn, and then they immediately ask me questions about the learning phase, because the learning phase is not kind on Meta. On LinkedIn, though, it actually is. During the learning phase, first of all, it's shorter than Meta's. It only lasts for about a day to a day and a half. So that's kind of cool. Whereas on Meta, at least from my own experience, it seems like it can be 4 or 5 days, sometimes a week. And it's not kind. It charges you more. It gets worse performance. On LinkedIn, most of the time during that day to day and a half, they're showing us in the best inventory, and they're showing us at lower costs, lower CPCs. They're assuming that we have a higher relevancy score than we might. They just assume that you're going to perform better than you do, just so they can get your relevancy score and test you out. And so most of the time, I don't worry about the learning phase on LinkedIn. I've had some clients who purposely try to keep us always in the learning phase, because that's where you get the lowest costs and the best reach and best inventory.
I mean, that's super interesting. So, I mean, how often are they making changes to the account? Like daily budget changes, or what's the trick there to sort of keep someone in that cycle?
Yeah. So this is interesting. I've had to go deep on this with reps. I'm trying to remember what I've done, but there are certain changes that you can make to creative that send it into learning. The one that I know does not send it into learning is changing the URL, which is nice, because sometimes you want to keep the same landing page, but you want to change a UTM parameter or something on it. Then it's great knowing that you can make that change and it's not going to make the ad go into relearning. But I think any other change that you make, changing out image, editing any text, I think all of that goes into learning. Then at the campaign level, if you change the status from paused to active or active to paused, it resets the relevancy score, at least temporarily. It sends it into like a mini learning phase is what it seems like, where it might take 2 or 3 hours to learn rather than taking a day or so.
Very interesting. I'd never actually considered that as a strategy. I think mainly because I've been so negatively hammered by Facebook's learning period. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned relevancy score, and I was listening to one of your older podcasts all about relevancy score, which was incredibly enlightening. But I feel like, at least outside of that particular podcast, I don't hear a lot of people talking about it. Maybe because it's not as visible as it is in Google Ads, as it relates to quality score. But let's spend a little bit of time there. Like, how do you think about it, given that you can't see it very well? I assume you're looking at metrics within the account to get a sense of what that is, and then using that to translate to optimizations. But yeah, maybe if you could dive in there a little bit.
Yeah, it's a little bit more art than science at this point. It used to be that if you exported your data from LinkedIn's campaign manager into a campaign report, one of your columns would be quality score. And it's nuanced because quality score is not the same as relevancy score. There's a difference in how it's calculated, but that was the only thing we ever got access to. LinkedIn never showed us our relevancy score or gave us any sort of feedback. All we know is that it's based off of your performance in competition or versus everyone who's competing for your same audiences. So I eventually just kind of gave up on this dream of actually knowing what my relevancy score is. And what I do is I know, based on which ad format and which objective I'm using, I know what the averages tend to be. So if you have your benchmarks in mind, let's say what I care about are clicks to a landing page. So I'm in the website visits objective. If I see my click-through rate is like 0.45, I know that's average. And so I'm going to assume that I have a relevancy score of like 6 or 7. if I end up with a click-through rate of like 0.9 or 1.1, I would look at that and go, okay, I don't know what my relevancy score is, but I'm going to guess it's close to like a 9 or maybe a 10, just because I'm higher than the benchmark. So that's how I do it. And over time, I like to plot my campaigns or my ads performance by click-through rate over time. And if you plot, you'll see after your ads have run for a little bit, it's oftentimes about a month, click-through rates will start to fall. And when I notice them start to fall, I know what's going to happen is my relevancy score is going to follow suit and it's going to make it more plummet. So I use that as my clue of when I need to refresh my ad creative to keep my relevancy score high and stop annoying my users.
Really smart. You talked a little bit about sort of sequencing ads, and you had a great stat. I wrote it down. I think it was something to the effect of you need 17 touch points sort of in that journey to actually get someone to complete a purchase. So, if you have ad creative for, I don't know if you create, 17 different messages within that touch point, continuum, but you have a lot of different ad creatives running in order to meet that 17 threshold. How do you manage sort of when that drop off occurs across that, sequential messaging, right?
Yeah. You actually have very little control over this, which is disheartening as a performance marketer. When I very first started in B2B, the prevailing wisdom was it takes 7 touches with a brand. And then I think there was a Forrester study 2 or 3 years ago that used the 17 number. And now I'm hearing it's even higher. So for us as B2B marketers, we're like, oh, crap. Like now it's getting even harder. But what I do is I build all of our clients' accounts into a 3-stage funnel where I'm going to put really engaging, non-salesy content in stage 1. Stage 2 is going to be meatier content. And then stage 3 is finally when I'm going to go for the kill and say, hey, get on the phone with a sales rep or buy something now. And, if the very fastest way to get to stage 3 is to interact with 2 ads, stage 1 and then stage 2. So if everything goes absolutely perfectly, they really love your brand and they just do everything that you ask them to do, you could be served an ad that says, hop on the phone with a sales rep on your 3rd touch with a company. But we know that doesn't usually happen with our ads at any stage of the funnel. Well, let me take that back. In stage 1, it's really common that we can run ads with like a 10% engagement rate. Well, that means that 90% of people who are seeing the ad on their screen don't end up interacting with it. And so if those 90%, if every day, 90% see it and only 10% engage, we'll get to a point eventually where it's like, oh, the same person, they saw the ad 10 times or 8 times before interacting with it. So that's naturally by showing your ads to the same audience over time, you're going to get some of those repeated touches. And then we find that organically your sales team can help a lot. We're seeing a lot of success with sales teams who will reach out to people and connect with them, the people who like or comment on your ads. Because a like or a comment becomes public. And so they can go click on who that is, send a connection request and say, hey, thanks for liking our post on this. What are you seeing? And start a conversation. All of those touch points going together, they all add up to that 17 or now probably more like 25 to help us really surround the prospect with what I call the big digital hug. They see you everywhere.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. You talked also about the benefits of being able to retarget interactions or engagements. And I'll show a little bit of my lack of knowledge around the LinkedIn platform in this question, but can you retarget based on whether it's a like or a comment, or is it all engagement lumped into one?
It's all lumped, unfortunately. I wish we could have a retargeting audience just for likers and a separate one just for commenters, some just for clicking to the landing page. Unfortunately, they don't let us do that. But what is so cool about this engagement retargeting, retargeting before like 2019 was all based off of someone hitting your website, hitting a cookie on their placed in their browser, and then them still having that cookie by the time they make it back to the platform so that they could be recognized and served an ad. Well, now half of the browsers out there toss your cookie immediately as soon as your session's done. And we know it's just going to get tighter and more stringent. So I'm really, through the tea leaves, I'm really reading like website visits retargeting, it's like trying to carry water in a leaky bucket. It's just, there's not much going to get to your destination. But with this engagement retargeting, I build this all the time because when someone interacts with one of my ads, it's because they were logged in and LinkedIn knows their identity and exactly who they are. And so when I watch Joe, 50% of one of your video ads, you may go 3 months from now and say, hey, let me create a retargeting audience of anyone who's watched 50%. And LinkedIn's going to be like, oh, AJ did this on this date. I'm going to stick him into this audience retroactively. And that's so powerful. 100% match rate, not requiring any sort of allegiance to cookies, and able to build in arrears that you couldn't do with a website retargeting. So I love this. I just wish we could communicate this to other platforms with the same, the same level of the 100% match rate.
In your 3-stage approach that you use with a lot of your clients, I know you have a different KPI to judge the success of the different stages. I read about one that you use. I'm going to murder it, but I think the way you describe, I never heard anyone else describe it the way you did. The 9 cents is what I remember mostly from what you wrote about, but it was like cost per new remarketing audience, or it was like something like, what does it cost you to get one more person in your remarketing pool? What was that metric again?
So this is why I'm still open to suggestions on it. I call it cost per retargetable user, but
okay.
There's got to be a better term out there. Someone please reach out to me and be like, hey, AJ, I think this acronym fits it perfectly. Let's get a new acronym.
Yeah.
But yeah, isn't LinkedIn ads, they're like $7 to $9 per landing page click is about what our clients are paying. So if you're retargeting people who are interacting with the ads that way, your cost per retargetable user is like $7 to $9, which is quite expensive. If you're going to build a 3-stage funnel to get someone to the bottom, if you paid $7 to $9 for every person in there, you can imagine like this is a costly funnel, and no campaign can run unless its audience is at least 300 people. So getting 300 people to the bottom, good heavens. But now with some of these other types of retargeting we can do, especially video and especially document engagement retargeting, you can retarget video viewers, anyone who's watched up to 25% or more of your video, you can retarget them. I like to do 50%, but lots of different options there. And with documents, you can retarget people who have just engaged with the document, like just flip to the next slide. And with these document ads, especially when you run them on the website visits objective, meaning you're only paying for the very small proportion of people who end up clicking the link at the bottom, but you're able to retarget everyone who interacts with this very engaging kind of carousel, we've been able to get our cost per retargetable user down to like 9 cents. Usually if you're in the 30 to 50 cents, you're doing great. Yeah, you can get them really, really low.
CPRU, that shouldn't be so hard to remember. CPRU, cost per retargetable user. I'm gonna try to work that into my nomenclature.
Yeah, totally rolls off the tongue.
That's great. Let's talk about audiences a little bit. LinkedIn and Facebook, for that matter, like everyone is recommending for these, significantly larger audience sizes in the guise of, oh, well, the models will get more data and they'll be able to find your user better. Regularly say the opposite, right? Like smaller groups, which is, again, what Joe and I sort of came up in this industry, single word keyword ad groups and things like that. So I guess like, how do you still think about that? Like, is that still the approach that you take in terms of your audience sizing? And, what are the pros and cons maybe of following LinkedIn's recommendation versus being a little bit more specific?
Yeah, we know what happened with Meta. Meta has so many data points on all of their users that you really can trust them to figure out how to optimize and find the right people. And so when Meta says, just target broad, we'll find the right people, I believe them. But Meta's a platform that, the last time I heard, this has been years ago, but it was like the average user spent something like more than an hour per day on Facebook. But then the average user was only spending an hour per month on LinkedIn. So you look at that data disparity, even if LinkedIn had exactly the same quality of data scientists, which they might, Silicon Valley is very incestuous. If they're working with the same kinds of data, they just have like a small fraction of what Meta does to work with. So when LinkedIn claims target broad will find the right people, I don't believe them. They don't have, at least in my tests, very little of the time when they say they're optimizing towards something, do I actually see that come to fruition working out. The video views objective, this works on LinkedIn. They know who's more likely to consume video, but all the other objectives, I just don't trust them very much to do that. So anyway, that's why. So now when you're building an audience that is 20,000 to 100,000 people in size, that's what I recommend. That's a great audience size. It's big enough that you can actually spend a budget on the audience, and it's small enough that you can be very specific about who you're targeting. LinkedIn's going to tell you, oh, you should have at least 300,000 people in an audience. When I have 300,000 people in an audience, I know I'm missing a huge opportunity to break that audience up into 3 separate groups so I can monitor their differences. To give you an idea, we ran this where we were targeting all marketing decision makers for an account. And that was the marketing job function, manager and above seniority, all in one bucket. What we did is they were actually doing this before they came to us. When they came to us, I said, let's break that up into 4 separate audiences. Let's have a manager bucket, a director, a VP, and then a CMO bucket. And we're going to put the same ads. You were showing the same ads to all 4 anyway. Let's just, no extra labor here. Let's just put the same A/B test in each of these different versions. And what we found out was it was actually cheaper to reach a CMO, and they had a higher conversion rate than it was to reach a manager. And so I presented this to the client and they went, whoa, we just assumed that a CMO was going to cost more to reach. And so, we're not building content for them. But now that we know CMOs care about our content, they click more and they convert higher, and it's actually cheaper to us. Throw out managers, just shut them off entirely. And now we're just going to go director and above. Those are the kinds of, I call it focus group level insights that you can get about an audience. When you're going to do the same advertising, the only difference is now you're going to learn about who engages with what better.
That's really fascinating. I would assume it's a common thought, right? Like CMOs more expensive, everyone's targeting them already, but maybe it's exactly the opposite. That's really interesting. Do you, in that scenario where you're sort of breaking out by job title, are you sending the same message, or are you tailoring it a little bit to someone who is C-suite versus just a manager?
Yeah, we've done this lots of times, lots of different tests. What we've found is by tailoring the message to someone, like you could call out CMOs at the beginning of your ad, and by tailoring it to each audience, you might be able to get slightly higher engagement rates or click-through rates, bringing you lower costs. But it's kind of a dice roll, honestly. It's like half the time it makes a difference, half the time it doesn't. So I would always recommend start with just the same ads across all 4 just to see what pops, and then maybe do a test of, let me tailor this to this audience and see, just because that's going to be more work to do the tailoring. But it's worth a test to see if it makes a difference in your campaigns.
Fine.
I'll also say, kind of going back to the smaller audiences side of things, it's really damaging to tell people you have to have an audience of 300,000 or above, because what are the smallest audiences that people run? Those are your retargeting audiences. They are your contact lists and your ABM campaigns where you're targeting just specific companies. And if people think, oh, these are too small to run, they're not doing some of the most helpful and awesome ways of targeting on the platform. So I'm okay running any audience as soon as it hits 300. You may have to bid higher for sure, and you don't expect this audience to spend a whole lot and send a whole lot of volume, but there's no danger at all to running an audience between 300 people to 20,000. I just know that once you hit 20,000, it's going to be a lot easier to spend a budget and get data.
With ABM, account-based marketing programs, do you find success when you're only using LinkedIn for an ABM program, or is it typically it's LinkedIn plus some other platform?
Yeah, there's a lot of platforms out there that will help with ABM. Most of those have a minimum buy-in that's kind of pricey. Whereas if you're already doing some advertising on LinkedIn, you get the very best ABM targeting there is. You're targeting someone because they claim that they work at that company. They were the ones who told you, rather than a lot of the other platforms out there are just going by IP address. Their IP address signals that they're in the same building as Microsoft. So we're going to say that they're a Microsoft employee, but they might be subletting and it's a different company. Who knows? So I'm totally okay with running a whole ABM program just off of LinkedIn, but I'm not against bringing in other platforms as well.
There's a lot of research involved before you start an ABM program? And I'm sure your clients ask you to get involved very early. Do you use any, can you put together your ABM company list with just LinkedIn as your research tool, or do you need additional tools to help put a recommendation in front of clients, say, here's the 100 you should go after next year?
ABM campaigns oftentimes revolve around companies in a specific industry, and LinkedIn's industry targeting, bless its heart, it's not great in most cases. It relies on whoever created the company page to select the right industry from the dropdown. And then back when LinkedIn was acquired by Microsoft, they looked at LinkedIn's industry list that was like 120. They saw the Bing ads one, it was what it was, the Microsoft advertising list that was like 480 something. And they went, ooh, let's migrate to that. So they did this big migration from a small list to a big one. And so now you might say, ooh, chemical manufacturing, those are exactly the right people that we want to hit. But if you select that industry on LinkedIn, you're only going to see those who have seen that there is now that category, here in the last several years. Those who created their company page beforehand, they're not going back to see if there's something different. So now a whole bunch of your ideal target is under just the general manufacturing industry. So that's a very wordy way of saying, I love to bring in data from other platforms, other intelligence. I love to ask the sales team, like, tell us who you would love to get to work with, who you think would be perfect. We can do lookalikes on LinkedIn. They call them a predictive audience, but you can do a predictive audience based off of a company list. And so that can expand and help you find more. As you're running ads on LinkedIn, now they're going to show you that in this companies tab, they're going to show you all of the companies by name that are interacting with your organic content and interacting with your paid content. And you can create dynamic lists there, add people. You're like, oh, I never thought to add that company, but they're interacting with us organically. Cool. Let's move them over into our paid funnels. So lots of different ways to build that. But yeah, LinkedIn, if it's based around industry, it's probably not your only research point.
I guess there's advantages to building out combinations of audiences where you sort of tack on attributes. And I think in some ways that in and of itself sort of brings down the audience size, which you're an advocate of course. Are there, I don't know, when you're thinking about setting up an account, are there common targeting combinations that you always start with? Or, I don't know, do you have a good sense of who that audience is when you first start? And so you're just applying that specific audience targeting. Does that make sense? Like, are there good best practices around what you should start with and then sort of pare down as that data comes in?
Yeah, amazing question. Most people, when they jump into LinkedIn ads, they go, ooh, job title, let's use that. And so what that means is, first of all, let me tell you what LinkedIn understands about job titles. They take what title you wrote in your experience, but it's a free form field. You can write whatever you want. I've seen CEOs with cute titles like chief trash can emptier or something like that. LinkedIn has to look at this and go, okay, what bucket do you fit underneath? And then so an advertiser can type a job title and it hits people who have that job title plus, a fuzzy match. What happens is in practice, LinkedIn only understands about 35 to 50% of job titles. So if you're using job title targeting, you are now competing with every other advertiser who's using job title targeting, meaning that your costs go higher and you're only able to hit half or 2/3 of the audience that you're trying to hit, or half to a third. And so you're paying more for access to a smaller audience. But it doesn't make me hate job title targeting. I just put it in a separate bucket. And then I'll also use job function with seniority. And this might be too broad. If you're trying to reach a digital marketer, job function of marketing is too broad. You're going to hit every type of marketer, the billboard and radio and account managers kinds of marketers too. But if it's not too broad, if you're trying to hit leaders in sales or leaders in IT, job function and seniority work really well. And that hits everyone. I mean, everyone on LinkedIn gets put based off of the keywords in your title and what industry you're in, and that defines your function and your seniority. So LinkedIn only understands 1/3 to a half of job titles, but job function, they understand pretty much 100%. So you get this larger audience that's less competitive with lower costs. Then I also love to use skills with seniority, just in case LinkedIn didn't catch their job function right or didn't understand their title. If they went and added that skill, Okay, they might be there. And then number 4, I'll do groups. If you go out, I don't care what your job title is. If you go out of your way to go and join a group about HubSpot, for instance, like I know you care about HubSpot. You went out of your way to go and join a group about it to have a discussion. I'm going to say you probably have something to do with the CRM or marketing or sales. So I like running all 4 of those targeting in separate campaigns, all against each other. And over time, obviously you run whichever makes sense. If one's too broad, you don't run it. You might only run 3 of these. But over time, you're going to see the personality of those 3 or 4 campaigns. And that's going to tell you how the targeting difference was. If one gets you lower costs or higher conversion rates, or the sales team is reporting a higher lead quality coming in from that, cool. You can give it more of your budget, bid it up, and bid down others, but at least test and see like which of these targeting types is getting us more of the people we want at the best cost.
Yeah, super smart. I mean, that metric on LinkedIn's understanding of actual job titles is, that's fascinating. But it makes sense, right? I've definitely seen some of those fuzzy titles being used as well. I was like, what is that? And then you have to actually read the description. I was like, okay, I guess I see it.
Yep. I see PPC Ninja. Like, how does LinkedIn know what job title that goes under? Yeah.
Right. Let's talk about maybe reporting real quickly. So, the retargeting metric, I already forgot the acronym, C, cost per targeted. Yeah, there you go. We'll get it branded on this podcast. What other sort of metrics, personal or sort of ones that you've come up with on your own or otherwise, do you look at regularly as it relates to, performance and how to make optimizations against the account?
Yeah. So stage 1 for me is all about getting someone's attention and engaging them. And so if it's video content, I have a whole bunch of metrics that I've kind of custom engineered for video. LinkedIn will tell you what your cost per video viewer is and your video view rate. But those are based off of someone watching at least 2 seconds of video. And it's very possible to scroll down slowly and get counted as a viewer, even if you were just passively scrolling. So I like measuring my cost per 50% viewer and my 50% view rate. Those are 2 ways I can tell, like, if you watch 50% of a 30, 40 second clip, I know you got the gist of what was being shared. So I like that. LinkedIn will also share your completion rate and your cost per completion. Those are helpful to me too. If you are not using video content, if it's static content, then I love engagement rate. And, LinkedIn will show you that, on its own. You don't have to do any sort of calculations. But then I do a calculation where, depending on which objective you choose, the definition of what a click is changes significantly. And so I've built one metric for click-through rate that works with every single ad format and every single objective out there. And I take landing page clicks plus sponsored messaging clicks plus lead form opens. If you use that definition of click, whether you're running something in the engagement objective or website visits, no matter which ad format you're running, you can do a cost per click based off of that or a click-through rate based off of that. And you have a really clean look of what percentage of people are actually clicking on the thing I want them to. And that's probably the main calculation I do when I get data outside of LinkedIn is, okay, show me this, because I know LinkedIn's not going to show that to me by default.
So let me understand. So you add all those clicks together, or you're reducing from the total clicks?
Yeah, I add those clicks together because what LinkedIn says in its clicks column, if you're in, let's say, the engagement objective, they will count any interaction with a post as a click. So a like, a comment, clicking see more to read more of the ad, all of those get called a click. But usually what I care about is someone getting to the landing page that I linked to. That's worth more to me than anything else. Or if you're using one of LinkedIn's lead gen forms, their native forms, I don't care about a click anywhere else on the ad. I care about the click where it expanded and showed them the form. So those are your lead form opens. And then in sponsored messaging, I don't want to count an open as a click. Only once they've opened the message, I want to count a click as somewhere in there did they create a meaningful click that would then take them where I wanted them to. So that definition of click, you build that into your click-through rate or your cost per click, and it's a lot more even of a measure when you're reporting across a whole bunch of different campaigns. It really compares them all apples to apples.
You mentioned lead forms. and we've had conversations with other guests around this, are there too many fields and, each one becomes a roadblock to actually getting the lead? Too few and your sales team yells at you because they're not qualified enough. So I guess, do you have a sense of like what that sweet spot is? And maybe are there must-have fields, like no matter what, that you feel are necessary to really get the quality of lead that you're looking for?
Yeah, most of the time, this is with all forms. If you ask for too much, people start to get weird about it and go, I don't think it's worth giving this much information about myself. So I try, even though most of these fields are auto-filled by LinkedIn, when you ask for them, still it's a turnoff when someone sees that 8 data points on them are being collected. So here's what I recommend. First name, last name, that's a given. I do work email address because most sales teams need a work email or at least prefer it. And then I ask for their LinkedIn profile URL. Their LinkedIn profile URL is auto-filled. They don't have to go and find it, which is great. But if the sales rep clicks on their profile, they can immediately grab their title, their company size, what organization they work for, all the information that you want to know about someone, it's there. Their industry, and of course there are enrichment tools and scraper services who will, if you give them a LinkedIn profile URL, they'll collect all that stuff for you. But that's my sweet spot. If I collect those 4 fields, I'm usually going to have a pretty high conversion rate. And then if enrichment can give me all the other data that my sales team cares about and I don't have to ask for it, then I'm super happy.
That first name, last name. So a lot of CRMs need them separate so that they can populate them correctly in the CRM. What's your methodology there? Have you ever tried just connecting full name as one field, or is your standard first and last just because that's how it works within the CRM is easiest?
I've tried doing it just to see if it helps our conversion rates at all. And what it usually ends up happening is I haven't yet found a CRM that knows how to categorize someone with a hyphenated last name or 2 middle names. And, when you're working globally, you have all kinds of different names and it's really difficult. So I always separate them first and last name in everything I do, just so a human or a program never has to try to make that determination of is that part of their first name, part of their last? Do we just leave it out? Offend someone? Yeah, it's better to keep them separate.
Okay. We've tried to do that testing in the past before. And if we did see a lift, it was very small. And so I think our standards are also sort of just keeping them separate as well. All right, I know we only have you for a couple more minutes. So let's transition to one question around agency building. And I think this is more maybe for Joe and I's benefit, but as you've grown and as we're growing, delegation is it's a massive challenge to be able to scale while still keeping the quality of the deliverables that, your clients have become accustomed to. I was listening to, I think it was a podcast around this idea of this 80% rule that you sort of defined around what you can expect your employees to be able to do as it relates to your 100% effort. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that, just in terms of, coming to terms with that for one, and maybe identifying who those people are that can actually hit the 80%? Because, right, that can't be everyone. So yeah, just maybe talk to us a little bit about that. Any tips that you have?
Yeah, for me, when I first started my company, I'd never had experience of really leading a team before. I'd been a team lead, but never made hiring, firing decisions. And so starting my own thing, realizing I needed help. And so starting to hire, making all the wrong choices right up front was a great learning experience. But the hardest thing for me was that delegation. When I'm really comfortable with how I do things, and when you go to give a task to someone and you find they're only going to do it, even if they're good, they might only do it 80% as well as you. And so you as a business owner, you can try to say, okay, I'm going to give you other tasks that maybe you perform better at. I'm going to hold on to this task. Well, eventually you get to the point where you as a business owner, you can't do everything. And it's a forcing function. You have to be able to delegate. And so then as I start handing off tasks to people and starting to get comfortable with the fact that they didn't do it quite the same way I would have, but when they send it to the client said, oh, this looks great. Thank you. I start to breathe a sigh of relief and go, okay, maybe this is going to be okay. So I really think as the owner or as the person who you have your baby and you don't want to give up your baby, you just have to have that experience of a forcing function, making you hand your baby to someone else and see them run with it, because that's the only way they're going to grow. What I have found for who it is who can do those tasks, I have had terrible luck hiring people. It's just been a crapshoot. Sometimes I'll get fantastic employees that want to stay with me for years and are great, and others who will take advantage of you and steal from you. And you can't tell the difference between them in an interview. So the way that I do it, I purposely look for people who I can tell are hungry. If they are working on side projects, that tells me that work isn't fully fulfilling them and they still want to gain knowledge and experience in other ways. And I go, ooh, if you've got that kind of drive, I want you. So I look for side projects as like my main guide for like how hungry someone is to learn.
I think your comment around the client receiving it and being like, oh, this is great, I've definitely experienced that as well. And I'm like, sometimes this level of quality is only in my head and the client really doesn't know the difference. So, and that's okay. So just getting more comfortable with that is definitely been a process.
Oh yeah. And having a relationship with your employees where you can keep giving them feedback to improve and get them closer to the way that you would do things and the way you prefer is great. And having that relationship being something that they're open to rather than them feeling like they're being criticized or picked apart all the time. That's the line I'm always trying to skate.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I know we only have you for a couple more minutes, so let's transition to some rapid fire questions. So it's the optimal number of times to leave a cruise ship in a week.
That was my
Ooh, I like this.
I know you like cruises. I heard you say that.
I do. You just have to look at my skin color to realize like I don't do well on a beach. I don't like being outside. I'm the vampire that would happily like live all his days in a basement with the lights turned off. But I love cruises as a vacation, probably because of the buffets. So my optimal number of leaving the cruise ship is 0. I want to go on, stay on until the cruise is over, and then leave at the very end. But obviously, I've got a family. Other people like the beach and the sun, and sometimes I have to follow along.
I love it. How about a LinkedIn tool, or I guess any tool, that saves you the most hours per month?
There's a tool called shape.io. It's my budget tracking tool, and it watches every account. It knows the budgets. It'll show me along the way anytime I want to know how we're tracking to budget, if we're pacing hot or under. But then it also has built-in functionality of like shut off a campaign if it spent the whole budget for the month. It's like my insurance policy, making sure I don't lose a client and get sued.
If you couldn't run LinkedIn ads, which channel would you prefer to master?
Right now, I'm running some Reddit ads, and I think they're really cool. So I like Reddit. I would also probably want to spend some more time on TikTok if I got more experience on the video side of things.
Love to have you back to talk about Reddit ads. It's we don't run a ton just because we haven't really cracked the performance on that side of the house yet. Yep. Yeah, I think it's a super interesting space. All right, last question in this round. A book that you would gift to performance marketers.
Boy, I hate to say this, but I'm not a reader. But I love crunching audiobooks and I love podcasts. So It depends on what they were most interested in. But if you're into social media, I would say go and binge listen every social media marketing podcast episode with Michael Stelzner. That's awesome. If you're into LinkedIn, I would suggest my podcast, or at least LinkedIn PPC. I would say my podcast. If you want to know just LinkedIn in general, there's a podcast it used to be called the Linked Informed podcast. It's by Mark Williams. Then LinkedIn got after him for having LinkedIn in the name. So I forget what it's called now, but that one just goes really deep into the organic side of LinkedIn. So it's going to be different depending on what area of digital you really care about.
Fair enough. All right, AJ. Well, we have probably 100 more questions that we could ask you. So thank you so much for giving us an hour. Before we let you go, let the audience know where they can find you.
Sure thing. So on any podcast platform, if you look for the LinkedIn Ads Show podcast, you'll find me there. It's a weekly podcast where I go really deep into every area I can possibly think of and teach you everything I know for free. We're also at b2linked.com. If you check out the website, we've got lots of good blog posts and stuff. And then follow me on LinkedIn or even send a connection request. Just make sure you let me know that you heard me on John and Joe's show. So I make sure I accept it. But I share all my best stuff for free every chance I get.
Yeah, I have to say your podcast is one of my new favorites.
Thank you.